Today, we see how Tanium Provision can enroll new Windows machines into Microsoft Entra ID and Intune. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. One of the top 10 videos on this playlist here on YouTube is our Tanium Provision walkthrough with Rob Brawl, who you've seen do many Tech Talk episodes. And recently, Rob reached out to me to say, hey, I've got an update that I think would be helpful for our Provision users, and we want to share that with you today. So Rob, welcome back to the show. I can't imagine anybody that hasn't met you yet, but please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, my name's Rob. I'm based out of the UK. Been with Tanium 4 years, actually, now this coming weekend. And yeah, I've been working with Provision since it was an early product with us and done lots of interesting things with customers with it.
Well, congratulations on 4 years, man. I can't believe it's only 4 years. It seems like we've been working together for a long time. That's just fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, I know we've gotten to see each other at Converge. We talk about it on the show all the time. And folks watching, if you would like to meet Rob, he's going to be at Converge again this November in Orlando, Florida, 2025. So Rob, what will you be doing at Converge this year?
I shall be running a lab on how you can use AI agents to accelerate your IT operations. So trying to go beyond some of the marketing that sometimes surrounds AI and look at how we can really use AI agents to be more efficient, more secure and quicker. So we're doing some work with Security Copilot. We're also doing some work with the Tanium Ask agent, which has gone GA for US commercial cloud and UK customers this week. We've built some really interesting labs, some real life examples of how you can use this to get more done faster.
And folks, that is going to be amazing. I mean, I've been here now 8 years, and it just blew my mind when I saw this recently, what we have released with this Ask Agent and these new capabilities. So you want to sign up for that, and you know it, in the show notes below, there's a free pass code for Converge. So see those notes in the show notes below. Get your free pass, either virtual or in person, and sign up for Rob's Labs. You have to do that by October 29th. That's the deadline. And you want to get on that as soon as possible before they fill up. With that Converge commercial out of the way then, Rob. So we're here to talk about Tanium Provision. And we've got a link in the show notes below to that famous walkthrough episode that you did teaching people start to finish on Provision. But for those who are watching today who haven't had a chance to watch that, could you just tell us very quickly what is Tanium Provision?
Provision is all about the very beginning of the life of a device and the end, effectively. So how do we put an operating system onto a device, which is more than just put Windows or Linux on, because inevitably we might want to join to Active Directory or we want to join to Entra ID, which is what we're going to talk about today. That then leads into deploying the Tanium agent automatically so that we can then update the device, we can put your software on, we can apply your policies, BitLocker, all of that fun. And then the other element of Provision, which is a little bit less used, but very, very much still important, is device retirement. So if a device gets lost or it's coming to the end of its life, we can handle wiping it, removing data from it, BitLocker resets, that kind of thing.
So today we're going to talk about one aspect of Provision that you said is related to what a lot of people are doing with Windows 11 right now and using this opportunity. What's this functionality you're here to tell us about today?
Absolutely. So we've all, if we've been working with Windows devices for a number of years, thought about joining them to Active Directory on-prem. What we're now seeing, and the end of Windows 10 has really accelerated this, is a move to Entra ID and Intune managed devices. So that's shifting from joining to an on-prem AD device, on-prem AD service rather, to the cloud. And how we do that is just a little bit different. So the integration with Provision, we just need to set it up differently. So we're just going to run through the options that are available and how you use them.
All right. Well, I know this is a show about demos, so why don't we just jump right in? And again, folks, as we go along, we'll have links in the documentation and all that stuff below. So Rob, just take us right on in. Show us what you got in your
So,
lab today.
a little bit of background first. If you were to go and buy a new device from any of the major vendors or build one, whatever, you'll install Windows 11 on it, and then you've got the opportunity to enroll that device into Intune. So if you've done this manually, you might know of going through Access Work or School within the Settings app on Windows, and you can then put your cloud credentials in, enroll the device into Entra ID, what was Azure AD, and then automatically manage that device in Intune. In a larger organization, you might be using a thing called Autopilot, which allows you, when you go and buy your laptop from whomever you're buying it from, the OEM can pre-associate that device with your Azure tenant. So the idea is when it gets shipped to the user of the device, they can turn it on, they can log in with their corporate credentials, and then Intune kicks in automatically. You might have the Tanium agent configured to deploy from Intune, so on and so forth. So the idea there is you're reducing the touch points, and you can have a scenario where you could ship directly to the end user. And that's great, except that it does require you to have registered the device with your tenant, which might not be possible. You can register devices that you already own. There's a process for doing that. We won't go into that today, but if you're familiar with Autopilot, you'll have probably come across that. I was talking to a prospect last month, actually, and the nature of the work they do, they're operating in lots of countries that are quite poor. So they often find that they're using second-hand devices over there. So the very nature of that means that getting them registered into their Azure tenant is not trivial. So they need another way of doing it. And that's a little bit of what prompted me to say to you, actually, this would be quite a good thing to do, I think, because, say, Windows 10 end of life, Windows 11 coming along, more and more people are going this route now. So let's cover what we can do. So there's a couple of ways we can handle this. There is using provision directly with Autopilot. So even devices that are not already registered with your Azure tenant, we can give an Autopilot experience on. So that experience, and I'll show you what it looks like, where you start the device up, you enter your cloud credential, and off you go. There's no requirement from us to have pre-registered that device in the tenant. So that's quite useful. Gives you some opportunities you didn't have before. The other option is using a thing called Windows Configuration Designer that you may or may not have seen before. This allows you to automate some of the configuration for Windows. It's used for lots of different things, but one of the things it can do is create a provisioning package. And the provisioning package is valid for up to 6 months. And that allows you to automatically enroll a device into a tenant without needing to enter any other credentials. So the end result is kind of the same, but there's a subtle difference in that with the provisioning package approach, the device is already in the tenant as soon as it's built and turned on. You don't have to enter any credentials for that to happen. What this means is the first time get up and go experience is quicker. Because
So that sounds a lot like Active Directory domain
exactly
join
that.
for
Yeah, it's
on-prem.
closer to that.
So this is kind of like a cloud version of that?
Yeah, it's as close as I think as you're going to get to that. The Autopilot approach allows you to use provision with Autopilot and automatically enroll a device when a user puts their creds in, but that device does not exist in Entra ID and Intune until that first login has occurred. The critical difference here is if you're waiting for something to happen, you're going to probably wait a little bit longer with Autopilot versus the configuration designer approach. A couple of other trade-offs that are specific to provision. As I called out, the provision package or the PPKG that WCD creates is valid for 6 months. So after 6 months, you're just going to have to go through a process, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's really quick just to recreate that file and re-add it to your bundle because it will stop working. Conversely, and this is unfortunately a video full of choices, the Autopilot approach does not install the Tanium client, and it does not run the custom scripts that you can use as part of your bundle. Tanium client, you would typically just package that and have Intune deploy it for you. I can show you what that looks like very quickly. Again, pretty straightforward thing to do. Custom scripts are an optional thing. If you've been working with Provision, you might have come across these already, but very briefly, they allow you to run a PowerShell script with some associated files that you add to your Provision bundle at the end of the build before it is released for people to log in. So we've seen people do all sorts of customizations and maybe deploy a VPN client or some other setup that's needed and that's custom before the device is handed over. Those don't run if you're using the Autopilot approach. There are other ways you could do it. You could use Automate, for example, to trigger that workflow automatically once the device is enrolled in Tanium. So other ways of handling it. You just need to be aware that you can do this, but these are the implications of it.
And that's why we have this show
Exactly.
to educate people on these design choices, because it sounds like there's some significant inferences and implications depending on which path you choose.
Exactly. They've both got their pros and their cons, and it's about what will work best in your environment for your use cases. Thankfully, they're both pretty straightforward to set up. And we'll show you what that looks like today. It doesn't take very long to do.
So what do we have in the way of like KB articles or docs on this?
Funny you should say that. So on my screen here, I've got helptanium.com up, and I'm in the provision documentation. So we'll just go to the beginning so you can follow me through. So provision user guide for cloud. And if I come down to the variables and advanced customization section, on the right-hand side, we've got topic links, and we can go to join endpoints to Entra ID. And that brings up this section initially. And the first section talks about the Windows Configuration Designer approach. The next section down is using Autopilot. And it's these two options that I've just briefly described and are what we're going to show you. It's only 3 steps, really trivial to do.
Trivial. I like that, because the longer you talk, the more I'm thinking, how complicated is this? But
fine.
It's yeah. So again, with cloud services, I know I've said this before. It's just like, okay, cloud service 1, cloud service 2, you just like exchange URLs and keys or something. I mean, but in this case, though, you said without authentication. So this sounds like a packaged bundle that's got a time bomb of 6 months, because there's some type of authentication token or something that's packaged in there. Is that what's
exactly
going on?
Yeah, because if you think about it, you're enrolling devices into your tenant, so you want a layer of control over that. You wouldn't just allow somebody to randomly do that. And yeah, so exactly as you say, it's time bombed. You can make it shorter if you wish. You could make it so this has to be refreshed every month. As I'm going to show you in a minute, it's not a long, laborious process to do this. So it's not really that much of a problem.
All right, well, let's see it.
We've got our documentation here. And we'll go through the WCD process first, and then we'll look at Autopilot. I've got a couple of bundles set up. I've got some devices built. In the interest of time, everybody's seen a provision build. If you haven't, there's the video that Ashley talked about earlier on to go into that. But I've shut down the machines at the point that provision has finished, so we can see what that first experience looks like and what happens. What's different about it effectively. So first one is, I say, using Windows Configuration Designer. Microsoft provide a bunch of docs on this, which you install the app and then it walks you through this. So I've already installed WCD on this machine, and I'm just going to walk you through doing it. So we fire it up, and then we need this top left option, which is Provision Desktop Devices, which is kind of unhelpfully named. What this should mean is configure a standard Windows desktop or laptop. So click that, and we give it a name. So let's call it Rob's Demo, and it will create a folder where it's going to put the output in. Finish that. This can be used in lots of different ways. And one thing I will call out, WCD, if you've ever worked with it before, you're probably aware of this. It forces you to enter a computer name. Provision will ignore this. So whatever computer name you specify within Provision is the one that is used. So I normally just put not used in here, because you can't leave it blank. It will complain and tell you off. So just put something in there, but it is not applied to the device. It doesn't matter. The rest of what's in here, I largely ignore, because again, we're We're not using WCD to customize the device heavily. The only thing we need it for is enrolling it. So things like product keys, shared users, pre-installed software, just leave all of that alone. So we go next. I'm not interested in configuring Wi-Fi. However, I am interested in this, and it's this second option that says enroll in Azure AD that I need to select. Now knows as Entra ID. And we need to toggle this refresh Azure AD credentials option. And you'll see here that it's got a token expiration, and that is set to 6 months in the future. So we're on the 1st of October today, and that's gone to the end of March next year. And then all we do is press the Get Bulk Token button. And this is now going to prompt me to sign in to my tenant. Okay, so we pressed Get the Token, and a few seconds later, after we've authenticated, we see this green message, bulk token fetched successfully. As long as you get that, you're good. If you didn't get that, you need to go and troubleshoot why. Could be an authentication permissions thing within Azure. Hit next. We're not doing any application or certificate customization. You need to not tick the protect your package box because we need to be able to use this token silently. So there's no capability to enter a key or anything like that. So at this point, we hit create, and we'll see robsdemo.ppkg has been created and copied to this directory. I can click that link, and in here we'll see a few things. There's some log files, various bits and pieces, XML. This file here, robsdemo.ppkg, is the file we care about. Now, to then use this as part of a bundle, if you remember, we're joining Entra ID, not on-prem, so we shouldn't be having any ODJ configuration, no talk of OUs, domain names, etc. You will want to specify computer name, so the computer name key value used in the normal way. You don't need to tell Provision, other than uploading this file, and I'll show you what that looks like, that you're doing an Entra ID join. There's no specific option to tell it. So all we do...
And I'm guessing that because this contains some type of an authentication hash, that we should protect this file and not leave it laying around willy-nilly just anywhere.
Yes, exactly. You would probably also want to use, and kind of beyond the scope of this video, there are specific device enrollment roles within Entra ID that are the appropriate thing to use with this. So you have a tightly scoped, effectively a service account that just does this particular thing, and it's there for enrolling or bulk enrollment. So obviously protect it, but if it did find its way in the wrong hands, you can't actually do any damage with it.
You and I have been around for a while, and I hate to keep making these old guy references for IT, right? But it's like we've seen these patterns before. You know, the way the files are handled, the way things are generated, and there's always this catch-22. Like somebody's got to authenticate somewhere to make this happen. And that's where this best practice of RBAC around that service account, make sure it can't do anything else. So when you just authenticated a minute ago, that should be with a service account that's RBAC'd only to be able to do this thing. So that's a really good practice.
Exactly. Yeah. Least privilege, as you would for everything, or hopefully as you do for everything. Cool. So we've created our file. What we will now do is show you what that looks like within Tanium. Okay. So we are in a Tanium instance here, and I'm going to come into Provision. And if you remember, I got my ppkg and I then put it into a zip file. If you remember what I was saying at the beginning of the call, we can support scripts and so on with this approach. It's the Autopilot approach that doesn't support scripts. So bear that in mind for what we're about to get onto next. So if we go into my OS bundles, I've got a series of them all here already created. And I've got Windows 11, 24H2, Entra ID. I'm going to edit this. And if I scroll down, we've got our WIM, IDK, unattend, we've got our Windows client. And then in my scripts and other files location, I've got a zip here. So if I was using customer.ps1, for example, to run something custom at the end of my build, that would be zipped up and it would be added to a zip file. That zip that I've just created, I just upload here. If I want to include PowerShell scripts and so on, I just include them in the same zip. So when I said it was quite trivial, if you've been working with Provision at all, you're probably familiar with this already. It's pretty standard. That's all you need to do. When you do your build, it will automatically be detected by Provision that it's there, and then it will be used and imported into the device. Nothing else that you need to do. Once we've made that change, we just hit save and we're good to go. What we'll now do is go and look at what's involved in setting up the autopilot piece. So I'm back on my VM here to do the demo with, and I'm going to go back to the help docs quickly, because again, this refers you to Microsoft guidance, because we're integrating with Microsoft technologies here. So what we're using is Microsoft provided mechanisms to do the autopilot enrollment. This calls out a few things that I've already mentioned. So if you go this route, the Tanium client doesn't get installed. Clearly, we're not going to do an Active Directory domain join, and the custom scripts, customer pre, customer PS1 do not run. The Windows PE scripts do still run. We don't tend to see many people using those because they're happening much earlier in the process and there's fewer use cases. So just bear it in mind, as I said, Automate is a really good way of substituting that generally. And then using Intune to deploy the Tanium client itself. So how do we actually make this work? We follow this link to Microsoft documentation. Now, this is a bit of a word soup, I warn you now. There's a lot going on here, but we do take you directly to what matters. You need to have the Microsoft Graph PowerShell module installed on a device, and you obviously need to have the right permissions within your Intune tenant to be able to read devices, look at device management, and so on. What this produces does not contain any form of token or credential, so it isn't time bombed. It's just a bit of configuration data. Clearly, you probably wouldn't go and stick it on an open GitHub. That wouldn't be terribly responsible, but people aren't going to be able to do anything nasty with it. So slightly different story from the previous one, where it will allow you to enroll a device. And effectively, what we do is go and grab our autopilot profile from Intune, which we need to have created, and we store a representation of that in a JSON file. That then gets added to our bundle, and the device uses that copy of the autopilot configuration to perform an autopilot install. So it's basically providing it locally without the device necessarily having been pre-enrolled. Just to show you what the profile looks like, if I go to my Intune tenant, go to devices, and I'm going to come to enrollment, and I'm going to come down to Windows Autopilot, come into deployment profiles. If you've worked with Autopilot, this will be familiar to you. I just created a very, very simple profile. I was skipping some of the standard screens, so nagging people about account options, regional settings, that kind of thing. So make it as a quicker process as we possibly can. That's all you need to do. Just create it so it's available. And then if we go back to our instructions, we just need to run this PowerShell. So I've got a Windows terminal here, PowerShell. And all I need to do is copy this, come over to it. I'm going to paste it in. The usual guidance about copying scripts off the internet and understanding what they're doing first clearly applies. I have read this first and I've been through it already, and I'm happy with what it's doing. So first thing we do is connect to Graph, and then we run the get autopilot profile command. And I've already run this. We'll rerun it in a minute. So get autopilot profile gets us the autopilot profile that we were just looking at through a PowerShell command. We specified a working directory that we're going to go to, so C autopilot. And then all we're doing is iterating through every profile that's there and effectively writing it out to a JSON file. So you then need to choose which autopilot profile you're going to apply. In this case, I've just got one. If you've got 10, pick one that's appropriate for these devices, and that then you associate it. What I'll do very quickly is just tidy up what I had already done here, and we'll just rerun this. There we go. So we can see that it's created it. So the JSON that it's created is human readable, and we can go and take a quick look at what that looks like. So opened it up. we've just got a bit of information in here. The tenant ID, good. If you ever work with anything in it, Azure AD or Entra ID Intune, etc., you'll be familiar with that. Tenant name, couple of other bits and pieces about how the profile is going to work. Most of the information actually comes from the tenant in real time once we authenticate. It just tells the device to go there. So not a lot to actually do or see here, not very exciting, which is good. So once we have that file, we can close it. And if we go back to our instructions, once we've created the file, we go back to our bundle and we upload the JSON. So it's in that scripts and other files section. Now, one thing to call out, it's subtle. Everything that we normally put in scripts and other files is zipped up. This is not. We just upload the JSON. I'll show you what that looks like to that section. If you remember, these don't run anyway. So you're very unlikely to be wanting to use that section anyway. So it's just uploading the JSON. So if I show you what that looks like. So in my bundles list, Entra ID was the first one we looked at. We're going to go and look at Autopilot now and edit that. And I'm going to scroll down. This is an identical bundle to the other one we looked at. The only difference is this section here. So this autopilot configuration file.json we've uploaded to the bundle. Again, exactly the same as Entra ID. No other configuration changes are needed. We haven't got to put a key in or anything like that that says we're using autopilot. Just the presence of the file here is all that's required. And then Provision will consume it automatically. We save that, assign it to our Provision endpoint in the usual way, nothing different there. And then we can use it. So if I go back to my demo machine, I have two Windows 11 VMs that I've built. So one with the Entra ID profile and one with the autopilot configuration. I stopped them or turned them off at the end of the build. So I haven't logged in or anything like that. We're at the what happens next experience effectively. Again, as I said earlier, we've watched builds already, so we'll skip straight to the relevant bit. But one thing I did want to call out, if I go into devices, I'm in Intune now, and go into Windows. The device that I built with the Entra ID profile, so this is the one that's using Configuration Designer with that token, already exists within Intune. So this is what I was saying, that it gets ahead of the process a little bit because the device itself is already enrolled at this point. Whereas the other device that's using Autopilot is not going to enroll until I enter a credential. So there is a time difference there. Equally, the one done with Windows Configuration Designer, the Tanium agent is already on there. Whereas the other one that's going to use Autopilot is going to have the Tanium client deployed via Intune. Really straightforward. I use the Intune WinApp util for packaging it. Then we just run the setup client with the silent switch and off we go. So if I bring these machines up, let's do the configuration designer one first. So we'll start that up. And what we expect to see here is a login prompt that is like what you would see after you've done the first time experience. So you're not expecting the first time user experience. And that's exactly what we get. So the thing that we see here is log in with your, or sign in rather, with your work or school account. So I'm going to sign in with a cloud user. And what we can see already is that it's going to not let that go into enhanced mode. We saw very briefly it resolved the name. So it showed Entra user rather than the UPN. This is the first time I'm logging into the user profile setup, still has to happen. But the all that first run of Windows does not. So let's let that go. And let's start up our autopilot one as well. And you can see the difference. So obviously this bit's the same. So this is obviously quite a different user experience. This is first time out of the box, select my region, so on and so forth. Now, what we see is going to be tailored by Autopilot. So in the background, we can see that we're connecting to Microsoft. It does an update check, standard stuff for a first time startup. So a bit of a different look and feel. So we can see in the background, this one we're in, we're good to go. I had a Tanium deploy. I have a Tanium deploy job configured in the background to push Chrome. I could have pushed some other things as well, but this has come down automatically. This wasn't part of the WIM itself. What we can see with this one is we're now talking to the tenant in the background, and we've got that familiar, if you've heard on Autopilot, sign-in prompt. So I'm going to sign in again with our same user, because at this point I'm enrolling the device. So this is part of what actually gets that device into my tenant.
And that's then where you would have Tanium client coming down from the
Exactly. So
Microsoft side.
yeah, that will happen a few minutes later. Now, another approach could be to include Tanium client within your WIM. So you could have pre-installed it. There's some guidance on our help site as to what to do next to basically strip it off. It's the same as if you're doing a VDI installation. So actually, it would be up and running in the background. That's another way of tackling that. So you don't have to use Intune to deploy it. It's just a common way to do it. It's what I did in the background. But what we'll see in probably 5 or 10 minutes, the devices page within Intune will show this new computer in there. And at this point, it's kind of the same thing. Once the Tanium client installs, we'll then see Chrome deployed to this machine automatically. And that's it. So quite straightforward, as I promised. But we did go into the detail of how it works and what to watch out for.
Rob, I always love your demos because you are so prepared and everything just works the first time.
Don't say that.
Hope I didn't
You-
just
You've
jinx
doomed
you,
it for whatever we do next.
you just I really appreciate your thoroughness and how you demo these things because and to say it's this easy is greatly appreciated for our audience, I'm sure. And you've done the homework and you've put in the steps to get us there, and look, it's already going. Yeah,
Isn't that pretty?
yeah.
Other than where I am at the moment.
Oh yeah, yeah. So if we could distill the design choices here for our viewers between these two methods, what are you think like the 1, 2, 3 things that you would really want to weigh to decide which approach you should take?
I must admit, the conversations I have had with customers and prospects about exactly that, they tend to like the Windows Configuration Designer approach because it's actually seen as simplifying it because you're not reliant on the device being enrolled by the end user. That adds a layer of complexity that the WCD token removes. So they tend to view that trade-off of having to manage the token every 6 months is better than the autopilot overhead that's added. That said, you can pick and choose as you wish. We've also been doing some work recently on doing deployments over the internet and consuming things like Azure Blob Storage, and there's some guidance coming on how to do that. In that scenario, I can see the autopilot approach probably being more appropriate because you're already building it from the cloud. It's well away from the corporate office. So that might make sense there. As ever, I'm probably not giving you an answer and it's horses for courses. It's what works best for you in your organization. And as we said, you can change it bundle by bundle, whatever is the most appropriate option at the time. If you are in a scenario where you are building virtual devices that are going to maybe be a little bit shorter lived than a physical, I think there's a huge argument for going with the WCD approach because it means everything else happens automatically. The device is already enrolled in Intune before somebody signs in. So it allows us to apply Intune configuration. The Tanium agent is up and running as well. So as you saw, the Chrome browser was pushed in the background as well. That's really helpful. And if you're thinking about time to value in terms of how long does it take from starting the process to the end user who's got a usable device, that's probably a really big argument in favor of going with the configuration designer token approach.
And if we zoom out for a second, this is at the end of the larger Tanium Provision experience. So whether that's an in-office user or a working from home remote user in a global organization somewhere, you've got different considerations to weigh
Yeah.
there. So combined with Tanium's provision capabilities and the flexibility of how to join this online, you've got some options. Like you said, and it may be valid to have both employed depending on the type of user.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, larger organizations are going to have lots and lots of different personas and device types going on, and some will be more appropriate than others. If you think about maybe, I don't know, a retail organization, your corporate side, the Autopilot approach might make the most sense. However, for your point of sale terminals in your stores, that's almost certainly not the right answer. And the token approach is probably the right way to go there. And go for it. Use them both.
So I'm curious, are there any common troubleshooting steps, like top two or three things that people might miss a step or misconfigure a step commonly that they should consider? I'm guessing like maybe when they create that deployment file, maybe they've fat fingered a URL or something, or a name, something like that. Where are the top troubleshooting spots?
Oh, there aren't that many moving parts, which is good. But things I'd call out when you're doing WCD, make sure you get the green text, make sure you get the PPKG, that's the only file you need, put that into a zip. One thing to call out, which has caught people out a few times with doing custom scripts, if you are in Windows and you go and put that folder in a zip, you will end up with a zip, if we open that up, with a folder in the root of it. And that's not what Provision is expecting. So if you're creating that zip, just be careful that you haven't ended up with a folder hierarchy there that you weren't expecting or didn't want. That can sometimes trip things up. Make sure, again, the subtlety with the JSON, if you're going with the autopilot approach, that doesn't go in a zip. You just grab that JSON and add it to the bundle. So that's kind of the exception to the zip rule with Provision bundles. And the other thing I was going to call out, if we go to this one. Okay, so we're in the Tanium client logs directory. If you have done anything with Provision historically, you'll know about this, I'm sure. But for those that aren't familiar, we add a ton of extra logs in here that are from the point the provisioning was happening. And if you're wanting to troubleshoot the importing of that PPKG file, if you go into the provision PE log, and we'll open that up, let's make that a bit bigger, you'll see lots of stuff going on in here. But critically, you see this line here, we're bringing in the PPKG. If that failed, now in my case, it ran successfully. So we have DISM runs, exit code 0, all was well in the world. If there was a problem, this is where you're going to see it. You're going to see some sort of error code. Get in touch with support, stick it into your favorite search engine. That'll probably give you a clue where the issue lies. It could be that the token has expired, that kind of thing. There'll be a hex code. The odds are you won't be the first person to have hit it. That would be my next step. But yeah, this is the place to come and look. You will also see an error on screen if there is a problem with the PPKG as well at the point right at the end of the build where it imports it.
Oh, Rob, I'm looking at the clock. Unfortunately, the clock is against us
It
here.
is.
Yes, we're coming down to the wire here. So I just want to thank you for coming on here today to give us this walkthrough, which is a really nice follow up, especially for people who are already leveraging Provision or considering it, and for those who are doing their Windows 11 migration and going to these the cloud enrollment options. So, anything else as we wrap up?
As you said, I'm going to be at Converge. If anybody wants to chat about use cases, weird and wonderful, always keen to hear it. I'll be there. I think I arrive Saturday evening, and I'm there through to Thursday lunchtime, and I've got some time. So yeah, ping me, find me. We can have a chat about it.
Well, Rob, thanks again for a great walkthrough again today. And so, for those of you who are watching, as usual, in the show notes below, we've got some juicy links for you. All right, we've got the documentation, we've got that Converge free pass, and we've also got a link to Rob's full walkthrough on how to use Tanium Provision. So, all those things are waiting for you there in the notes. And so, thank you for joining us again on this Tanium Tech Talks episode. Until next time, go Tanium.